prevailing narrative focuses on launch-on-warning protocols and kinetic exchange. This is a deliberate misdirection. An intercontinental ballistic missile is a symmetrical weapon. Its use guarantees mutual annihilation, a negative-sum game for all participants. Weaker global powers understand this mathematical certainty. Public rhetoric, such as claims that war speculation is mere hysteria, sourced in R1, serves as a smokescreen for the real protocol: asymmetric escalation. The primary vector is not kinetic, it is silent. According to CSIS analysis, the global economic and military apparatus depends on a few hundred fiber optic cables on the ocean floor. These are the arteries of the system, severing a critical node. For example, the cables landing in New York and Virginia, which process 60% of global financial data, does not require a nuclear submarine. It requires a specialized drone and a precise cut. This is not war. It is strategic paralysis. The second vector targets the high ground, orbital assets. RUSI reports confirm extensive investment in non-kinetic satellite neutralization. This involves co-orbital inspector drones and ground-based directed energy weapons. The objective is not to create a debris field, but to blind the constellation, disabling GPS, military communications, and the timing signals essential for high-frequency trading. The kinetic cost is zero. The systemic cost is total. This two-pronged attack creates the blind Leviathan, a dominant power possessing immense physical force, but stripped of its central nervous system. It cannot see threats, command its forces, or process transactions. It is in this state of induced paralysis that the strategic simultaneity conundrum, source number 2, is triggered. With the Leviathan blinded, adversaries can initiate multiple subcritical crises, such as an energy blockade or a coordinated sell-off of dollar-denominated assets, source number 4, without fear of a coherent response. The system is forced into a solvency failure, not because it lacks assets, but because it cannot access the liquidity to service its liabilities. This isn't the type of event precious metals markets are built to predict, source number 3. This is a structural kill. The first phase of modern systemic conflict is not a bang. It is silence. The motive is not expansion. It is survival. A state facing a domestic solvency crisis where an unpopular war becomes an unserviceable political liability operates under a different logic. According to CSIS analysis, the kinetic cost of such conflicts creates a feedback loop of internal dissent and economic decay. The regime's balance sheet turns negative. It can no longer meet its core liability, maintaining power. This is not a geopolitical choice. It is a mathematical imperative driven by weakness. When symmetric warfare guarantees bankruptcy, the only rational pivot is to asymmetry. The objective shifts from battlefield victory to exporting your solvency crisis. If your system is failing, you must engineer a failure in the adversary system. This is the blueprint behind the BRICS initiative identified in reports to decouple from the petrodollar. It is not about creating a better currency. It is about attacking the primary liability structure of the dominant power. This survival imperative weaponizes what strategic planners call the strategic simultaneity conundrum, a concept tested in crisis simulations. The goal is to present the dominant power with multiple subcritical threats across different vectors simultaneously. Each new crisis, a regional flare-up, a resource gambit, a cyber incident, is a new liability placed on the opponent's overextended balance sheet. The intent is not to win any single engagement, but to force a systemic margin call where the hegemon cannot service all its commitments at once. This protocol requires a specific public posture, strategic ambiguity. 1 week, threatening kinetic action; the next, dismissing war speculation as hysteria, as documented by AOL.com. This is not diplomatic inconsistency. It is a calculated tactic designed to paralyze the target's decision-making cycle. While the dominant power debates intent, the asymmetric liabilities are already compounding, turning the global system itself into the battle space. The core protocol of this asymmetric conflict is not kinetic, but economic. The math is irrefutable. Analysts at RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, have quantified the imbalance. A single main battle tank, a kinetic asset representing a $5 million liability on the national balance sheet, is now consistently neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is a 10,000 to 1 cost per kill inversion. This is the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal force has collapsed, enabling weaker actors to weaponize mass and attrition. The objective is not to win a symmetric battle, it is to inflict a systemic solvency crisis by forcing the dominant power to expend its high-cost assets against a near-zero-cost threat swarm, accelerating a launch-on-warning state of economic collapse. The kinetic theater of operations is a distraction. The primary battlefield is not geographic, it is a network of engineered gray zones. These are not nations, but systemic vulnerabilities, financial choke points, digital backdoors, and critical supply chain nodes. CSIS analysis confirms that weaker global powers are no longer staging for symmetric warfare. The protocol has shifted to asymmetric escalation, weaponizing the very interconnectedness of the global system against its architect. Consider the operational blueprint. Reports highlight the weaponization of energy markets and currency blocks. The energy war targeting the petrodollar is not about Venezuela. It is about forcing a systemic liability onto the U.S. balance sheet. Simultaneously, public statements are used as a strategic smokescreen. Putin's claim that war fears are hysteria just weeks after issuing kinetic threats is not a contradiction. It is a calculated protocol to paralyze decision-making and obscure the true staging grounds of the conflict. Regional instability, from resource-rich zones in southern Africa to domestic fractures in western states, must be recontextualized. These are not the root cause. They are proxy laboratories. In these controlled environments, adversaries test and refine methods for triggering currency devaluations, supply chain failures, and social fragmentation at a low kinetic cost. Each event is a data point, optimizing the playbook for deployment against the core target. The objective is to activate what political science simulations call the strategic simultaneity conundrum. By launching multiple subcritical solvency attacks from these gray zones, the dominant power is forced into a launch-on-warning scenario with its financial reserves. It must allocate liquidity to every engineered fire at once. While markets monitor obsolete indicators like precious metals, the real metric of systemic risk is the defender's capacity to service all liabilities simultaneously. The mathematical certainty is that it cannot. The final escalation vector is not kinetic, it is computational. Analysts at RUSI define the Launch on Warning doctrine as a relic protocol. If early warning systems detect an inbound nuclear strike, a retaliatory launch is initiated before the incoming warheads detonate. The objective is to guarantee a counterstrike. This protocol is now a systemic liability. This is where the protocol of asymmetric escalation achieves its final objective. An adversary does not need to launch a physical missile. They need only launch a cyber attack that blinds the radar and satellite networks. This creates the fog of digital war, an engineered absence of data. The commander is now faced with a solvency paradox. The protocol demands a decision. Is the signal loss a technical failure, or is it the precursor to a decapitation strike that is currently 12 minutes out? Waiting for confirmation means risking the total loss of retaliatory capability. Launching means initiating a kinetic exchange based on a digital ghost. This dilemma is the apex of the strategic simultaneity conundrum, cited in Political Science Now simulations. By triggering this single point of failure, while the dominant power is overextended, managing multiple geographic and financial crises, the weaker power forces an impossible choice. They weaponize the opponent's own doctrine, forcing them to either escalate kinetically from a position of total blindness or strategically collapse by default. The choice is an illusion. The system was designed to fail.